Hello out there, all my bookish friends in Booktube land, and welcome to another episode of Tristan and the Classics. And I think you're really going to like this video because in this episode we are talking about how you can build your very own classic library, or to put it another way, how you can build your own library of classic books, whichever way takes your fancy. So without further ado, let's get stuck in, shall we? Now, the request for this particular video has been quite overwhelming. Lots of you out there watching have said to me that you would really feel you'd benefit in being guided on how to build a classic library. Now, what I want to say at the outset is this video is likely not going to go as you maybe imagine it will. But you'll have to stick around to the end because I'm going to seek to energize you, invigorate you, really start helping you put your mind on a track to seeing what the future library that you're going to build will look like and how it's going to grow and improve and be specific to you. I don't want you to have a library of books that just adorn a bookshelf that I never read, because that's just expensive wallpaper, isn't it? It's like £2 a centimetre. So we're going to go through some simple tips. And what you're going to need is a pen and some paper. Now don't worry, it's not going to be like an exam or anything, but if you haven't got a pen or paper with you, by all means listen to this and do it mentally, but come back to this video with a pen and paper and do the exercises that I suggest. You will thank me in the long run. The first thing we want to take a look at when developing our own personal library of classic books and great literature is our objective. Now, the reason I say that is because millions of people every year have the resolution to read more books. And amongst those millions, quite a lot of them say they want to read classic books, because we know that there's something about the classics that have made them endure and that they have an influence on people's lives and on the culture around us. They're not just stories, they're more than that. So we strike out to read more classics, but we run into a problem. How many times have you gone out and bought a bunch of books and then actually never got round to reading them, or started only to find it very sort of boring or hard graft to get through some of these books? Well, when building your personal library, that's not the kind of books you intend to have, is it? So we've got to look at the objective of building your classic library. Your objective in building a library of classic literature is this: to have in your house a beating heart of volumes and books and works that reflect you as a person, that describe and fit and shape and mould and work on you, your personality that has come from years of your personal experiences and interactions with the external world, with your own inner mind and monologue, the way you talk to yourself, the influence of friends, environment, family. Not all books resonate with every person. Even the most famous books of all aren't loved by everybody. Tolstoy wasn't a fan of Shakespeare, would you believe? But the vast majority of people that get into Shakespeare absolutely love him. Not everyone loves Tolstoy, despite the fact that War and Peace is right up there as one of the great works of literature. What most videos and blogs that I visited before doing this video, what I noticed they often did was to build a classic library. They went through a list of books which are so well renowned that they put them together and said, your library should contain these, and went through a sequence of books. The problem with that is if you don't read them, like we say, they're just wallpaper. Take Thomas Mann, for instance. You've got Magic Mountain, a big thumper of a book, and Buddenbrooks is one of his great works. If you bought both of those because you were told they were great works for a classic library, and then you read the first 100 pages of Buddenbrooks and discovered, I don't like this at all, you're not going to finish it nor Magic Mountain. Why have it on the shelf? Does that make sense? What you want are books that are going to get into you, that are going to be enjoyable for you to start with, especially if you're new to the classics. Or if you've read a lot of classics, but you really now want to develop a master library, as in not just having random classics, but building your own specific canon, your library for your life. You're going to want to have that objective in mind, that you want to read books which matter to you. But the question is, how do you find them? Now, this is where we move into step 2. We've got our objective. You want to find and grow a library specifically tailored to you. But now we need to find out how we can do that. So let's step to point number 2. Now this is where I want you to get your pen and your paper out. And believe me, if you can't do this right this minute, if you're listening in the car or something like that, fine, carry on listening, but please come back and do this exercise. Matching your hand to your mind has a more than a doubling of the effect of your thinking. It really forces your whole being to focus on a topic. It opens up locks that are in our mind where we're getting distracted by other things, and helps us to really focus in. Because again, we want to build, when you've got a classic library, it's one that will stick with you. They are books that you don't read once. You will come back to these books again and again through life, and they will grow and change with you. And if you do this exercise, what's so great about it is you're going to start a library which will teach you how to grow it. It will begin to lead you further on in your journey, educating you, culturing you even more and more. So does that sound good to you? Please, please, please get your pen and paper. Here's the exercise. I want you to just take 5 minutes, maybe 10 if necessary, and I want you just to put a heading on the paper, books that I have loved. Now, you might think, I haven't read many books. If that's the case with you, that is fine. You can use films that you have loved. I want you on this list now, not just to write down the books you've read, but I want you just to drift off into your memory banks and try and remember any scene from any book whatsoever that really stuck with you. Something that you still now can taste the taste, see the sights and the colours, smell the smells, get a sense of atmosphere. For instance, thinking off the top of my head right now, I go immediately to Tess of the D'Urbervilles, okay? There are scenes in that book which just stuck with me. Not the meaning of the book, not the story, just scenes which are very, very vivid to me. I jot that down. These do not have to be classic works, by the way. I'm talking any books whatsoever or any films whatsoever. Write down those that you think were really, really good, okay? And when you've done that, come back and carry on with this video. So, you've now written a list of either books or films, or maybe a mixture of both, that you really loved. What you're going to do now is I want you to go through them and make a little note next to each one why you particularly enjoyed it. What effect did it have on you? How did it make you feel? Was there a particular atmosphere that you liked? Was it because it was all story-based? Was it because it was action-based? Was it because it was suspenseful and you liked that? Was it because it was full of imagination and wonder? Was it because it was steeped in adventure or mystery? Maybe it was the sort of prophetic element of it, or the twisted look on the world which you'd never considered before. Maybe it was a particular time period and you just love that time period. Go through that list, write down your reasons for liking each book or film, and then what I want you to do is see if there are common denominators, and you will nearly always find this. It will tell you specifically what different types of story, because let's face it, films and novels are both stories, what types you like. And I want you to focus in on if there is one or two that stand out. So if I were to consider, right, I could put down, I really enjoyed Titanic, I thought it was a great film. It could be I really liked Downton Abbey. I might have liked, you know, About Time is another one, or The Notebook, whatever. Say I've picked those. I can start looking and say, well, what do I find in common here? Well, one thing that I do notice about all those, there's the love interest in there. There's an element of romance, but it's not straightforward. There's a certain tragedy to this collection of works that I've just mentioned. There's a bit of struggle. It's not overly dramatic. Okay, so in Titanic, the Titanic sinks, but the story beforehand, well, it's Romeo and Juliet on a boat, but there's a lot of struggle and tension, but it's not like Marvel, is it? Now you might have on yours, you might have things like Marvel, they may be there, or Jurassic Park, or something else. What you're focusing on there, you're noticing there is adventure, there is lots of action, there's lots of striving for a triumphal goal. There's threat, of course, seeping through all of that. Write those things down, okay? Just take the time now to look at those things and come to the point where you can say, okay, the things that these have in common are, and find the type of story. When you've done that, come back and carry on with this video. Right, so now you've got a list of stories and things that you've really enjoyed, maybe even moved you, that's even better if they have, and you've analysed them a little bit to understand what it is that really grips you about these stories. Now, the reason you've done that is because to build a classic library, it's going to work on you and you on it. And you want to be reading books that you are going to enjoy, and then let them expand your horizons. So, looking at your list, what genres have you found you are interested in? Or what types of story? So you might find that you like fast-paced. Plenty of you will find, actually, I don't really like the action-packed. I like the slow and deliberate. My wife, she likes sagas. She likes to see a family or a group start off and progress and progress and progress and progress over a long period of time. So she loves Anne of Green Gables by Montgomery, for instance. She would love Downton Abbey because you're watching a family grow over a sequence of time. You might actually find, wow, science fiction. I love the inventiveness of it all. That's what I really like. Now, inside us, we might think we've got to do philosophical in our library. No. Philosophical might be powerful and moving, but you know, adventure, thrillers, comedy, these are all aspects of our human nature, and they all have great value. It's not just the cerebral. So now that you've got the genre you like, this is what you're going to do to start your classics library. I want you to just go online and type in Google, if you like thrillers, 10 19th century thrillers, or top 10 classic thrillers, top 10 Gothic novels, top Gothic classic authors, okay? You're going to do that. Now, if it's romance, you're going to do it with romance. If you love deep thinking, like psychological stuff, then type in the most renowned classic psychological authors, top 10 classic psychological novels, okay? Psychological novels in the 19th century. Just put in 19th century, make sure that you don't just get a list that has something from just 2 years ago pop up, because the classics have a certain longevity and that's why we know they're worth it. They've spoken for so long to so many people and been held in esteem. So that's how you're going to start, okay? Now, what I want you to do is now write down the authors' names that you come across, okay? Make a list of them. So with psychological authors, or maybe authors who are interested in the pain of human existence, well, you're going to come across Dostoevsky. you're probably going to get Hardy turn up. Turgenev, a lot of the Russians actually, Tolstoy would be in there. Shakespeare will turn up as being about the human condition. Write all these down, okay? Now, what science fiction, if that's you, like who's going to come up? Jules Verne is going to come up in this. Around the World in 80 Days and 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea and all that kind of stuff. And that draws something from your personality, okay? H.G. Wells would go on that list. Whatever the genre, I want you to go and write down those authors. Now that you've got those authors, this is what you're going to do next. Take a look at some of the works that they're famous for, okay? So if you think of H.G. Wells, for instance, you've got The Invisible Man would be an example, or is it War of the Worlds? And like we said, Jules Verne, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. For me, I'm a character-driven person. I love, love, love people. So Dickens is going to come up when it comes to characters. Now, using me as an example, I will look and say, okay, I've got Dickens. Now, I'm going to go and have a look at his works. Very easy. You're on Wikipedia, you type in your author and bibliography, and it will come up with the books and stuff that they wrote. What you're then going to do is go on Amazon, bring up those books, and look at the blurb for each one of them. You don't have to write these down, but I just want you to make a note of the one that appeals to you. And that's the book you are going to read. You might pick, say my wife was going through the sagas, she may pick something from Dumas because, the D'Artagnan series, there's a whole saga there, isn't there? She may pick up something by Trollope because he does huge, extensive works like the Barsetshire Chronicles. Or it may be John Forsyth's, the Forsyth Saga by John Galsworthy. She could focus on those and she could look and read and think, right, I'm going to try this one and this one and this one. Then you don't go out and buy an expensive book. This is what you do. You either get it on Kindle for free. You can get nearly all the classics for 0 pence on Kindle. Or get a cheap edition. So here I've got the Wordsworth Classics. And here I've got Flaubert's Madame Bovary by Collins Classics. Both of these you can get for £2.50. And if you're on Amazon Prime, you can get next day delivery. I'm not sponsored, by the way. But this way, you can try out a book without spending a lot of money. And guess what? If you don't like it, you've learned something. But when you find an author that you do like, you're now ready for step 3 in building your personal classics library. Step 3 for building your own library of classic literature is so rewarding and exciting. And I think you're going to see how this works, because already we know you've got a genre you're going to enjoy. You've gone back to some of the bigger names who are known for doing this genre and have lasted, so you know they're going to write really well. You enjoy one of their books. What you're going to do now, first of all, is start reading more of that author's books. So I read Dickens way, way, way back. Great Expectations was my first book I ever read. It was a doorway into Dickens, and I absolutely, I adore him. That's 2 door sounds there. I read Jane Austen because of her wit, her sparkling way of writing, the easiness of it, but also because I know a bit about the history of those days, the cutting satirizing of elements of society in Jane Austen. I just read Pride and Prejudice, loved it, and then read all of the other works, and actually happened to love all of them. I want you to do the same. When you find an author and you go, wow, I really enjoyed that, then start reading more of their works. Our temptation when building a library is we think without an objective. We think, I need to be eclectic, I need to have everything from everywhere. That doesn't work if you don't read them. It's better to build a library starting from a place you love. So if you find a number of classic authors, in your genre. So like I mentioned, my wife, she could have Goldsworthy, she could have Dumas, she could have Trollope. You can start there. And then they've got a whole sort of collection of their own works. And they will introduce you to new ideas. They develop as an artist over time. They expand their own horizons. And if you're following their works, yours begin to expand too. Okay? And so from this, you will start building a library of books you love. And this is what I want you to do. Once you've used a cheap book or done it free on Kindle, then when you've found the one that like really touches you, go and buy the hardback of that one. Or maybe a paperback but a nicer cover, so that it can sit beautifully on your shelf. And I want you to make a special shelf for the books that move you. It's one thing having a lot of classics, nothing wrong with that, but we're talking about making a beating heart shelf, or 2 shelves, or 3 shelves, which will happen over time. These are the books that entered your very being, that sort of permeated through the marrow, through the blood vessels, through the heart. It sort of crawls and layers your skin. It's down in the DNA. These books will be eminently readable time and time again. Okay? But here is a real good tip for you with those authors you've begun to love. Go on Wikipedia, type in the name of the author, or use Charles Dickens as the example, and find out who his contemporaries were, whose circles he moved in, or who influenced him. So Dickens, for instance, he knew Bulwer-Lytton, Lord Bulwer-Lytton. He knew Harrison Ainsworth right at the early part of the 19th century, and they passed ideas back and forth between each other. He was best friends with Wilkie Collins. He knew Trollope as well. Now, if that's the case, if they worked together and created friendships, well, he must have appreciated the way they thought. Even though they're different to him, no one writes like Dickens' characters. But he appreciated others. So I find Wilkie Collins is a great friend of Dickens. Now you go out and you buy a Wilkie Collins. Or in your case, whatever your favourite author is that you've just found, classic, who were their friends? Go and inspect one of their books. And there's a high chance that you're going to enjoy what they do. But they will lead you in a different direction. They will introduce you to new motifs, new ideas, new ways of writing, which can start simmering underneath, and you can't understand why it's affecting you, but it is. Okay? If you like Tolstoy, by the way, Tolstoy actually wrote a list of books which seriously affected him. Okay? You can get that online for free. And it's a bunch of different writers, a lot of Russian writers, there's French writers. Dickens is also one that deeply affected him. So you can find these things out. And you see what that's doing? It's building you, or giving you signposts to works of literature. Because Tolstoy doesn't just say an author, he says David Copperfield. Okay? He says the Gospels of the Bible. Not the whole Bible, the Gospels. It gives you a signpost saying, go and read that. Because if you like Tolstoy, you might like this. And then you pick another person up and you think, wow, this is brilliant. I love it. I can't work out why it touches me so deep, but I do. Now, go and get that book in a nicer copy and put it on your beating heart shelf. The classic section, the classic library is beginning to grow. Okay, out and out. And when you get used to that person, you might discover that there's a certain style that they use. Then you can look up that style and which other classic writers use this style of writing. Okay, they might be realists. So if you've got realism, maybe you like George Eliot and you find out she's a realist, you start looking further and guess what? You're told that Flaubert was the father of realism. So you go off and you look at Flaubert's Madame Bovary or A Sentimental Education. And suddenly you touch these and you think, I love this. I love this. And that goes into your personal library of classics. And believe me, as you do this, they will stretch you out and you will begin to find the other big classics just by doing this. And you'll cultivate your mind an appreciation for why these stories are so deep and moving, and it will just continue over time from that point to grow into a bigger library. So that was the third tip, but there is a fourth tip that I want you to listen to, which is how to find books or books to get into which aren't found in this route. So we'll come on to that next. The last tip, or the last way I want to advise you on building your own classic library, your own library of classic literature, is, it's going to sound contradictory to what I've already said, but bear with me. I want you to start with the way we've recommended it. Start with the books you like now and find classic authors who write that type. Find that genre or that style of writing, whether it's slow, fast, psychological, philosophical, prophetic, maybe it's historical, so you've got ones like Walter Scott, they're all in history, whatever it may be. In fact, speaking of history, if you like a particular time period, look up books written by classic authors on that time period. So if you like the French Revolution, then you've got not Hard Times, Tale of Two Cities by Dickens, but you've also got The Gods Want Blood by Anatole France. You could base your decisions on just a time period that you love reading about. So that's another way of finding authors. But now I want to come to this other one, and what it is, it's actually, once you've begun building your library, then start looking for the big names, the big well-known books. By big, I don't mean volume size, I just mean the really, really well-known works, okay? So, War and Peace, the Brothers Karamazov, The Great Gatsby would be another one. David Copperfield is there as well. Shakespeare is there, different sort of, it's playwriting, isn't it? And it's a much older, but it's still wonderful. One of the books that certainly I would recommend being in a library is Don Quixote by Cervantes, because it's pretty much the grandfather of the novel. Now, you might say, but haven't I just said don't do that? Don't go out and buy those ones straight away. Start with the ones that you know you love and start building. But then read the blurbs of some of the big name books and see if there's any that really appeal to you. Now, a lot of them are big books. If you're thinking of Don Quixote or you're thinking of Anna Karenina, these are large tomes. And in case you're worried about how to read that, if you're a slower reader or you don't have much time to read, please go and see my video on advice for slow readers, and it's also advice for how to get through a big book. The reason you're looking at these very famous works is because they are pillars of literature for a reason. Millions of people through time, hundreds of years, or if it's modern literature, it's at least 50 years, that's 2 generations at least, have had these things resonate with them, and they must touch the soul of a human in a certain way. So you go out and find a couple of these, write a list, look at the blurbs, pick one, and that will introduce you to a great author. And now I'm just going to put a little more specificity on this suggestion. When you start looking for the great authors, the great works, I want you to do something. Start with your own language, okay? Whatever your language may be, go to who is considered the classic author of your language. Remember, we're building a classic library that fits your personality, that will live with you, that will grow with you, that will change and mold you, challenge you. Now, you want to start that with the language of your heart. The reason for that is your culture that you live in, the way you think right now, is undeniably affected from past cultural works. And so they will have a particular impact on you in your own language, different from the classics from other countries. So start there. Once you've done that, that will continue to build your appreciation. You're starting to, you're starting to build this catalogue, sort of a solar system of works in your heart, which are beginning to expand you and help you know what you're looking for and what you appreciate. It's developing a taste, like when you first taste tea, you don't like it as a child, but you drink it because the adults do. As you keep drinking, you get a taste for it. And then if you want to, you can go further and taste all kinds of teas like Lapsang Souchong and then Earl Grey and Assam and so on and so forth. Same with literature. So once you've done, when you want to go to the great works, start with your own language, at least a couple of them. If you like those authors, read more of their books. If they have big effects on you, the big effect ones, get those in a special edition and stick them on your beating heart shelf. Then from there, by all means, because you've built this fine repertoire that's already developing you, that's already showing you the insane wonders of great literature, then by all means stretch out. And if you're British, go and read Tolstoy. And if you're Russian, go and read Collins. And if you're French, go and read Manzoni. You know, do that. But build it slowly. And then go back to the idea of who influenced these writers that I love. And go and look at their works. And you will find so many authors who you've never heard of who wrote spectacularly good books. And remember, you are not looking for highbrow necessarily. You will eventually be pushed into philosophic. You will eventually be pushed into some political, which you may not appeal to you right now. But that doesn't mean that science fiction and suspense and murder mysteries and the Gothic and modernism and all that kind of stuff doesn't mean any of those are lesser. What you love is what you love. It's what makes you who you are. And so develop your classic library around that and then let it grow you by recommending new authors who influence the authors you love. And then you'll find their works and they're influenced by who, and who did they mix with in society? Who was writing at the same time? Who wrote books similar to this? So you've got Madame Bovary, I mentioned earlier, but Theodore Fontaine of Germany writes Effie Briest, which is in some respects like Madame Bovary. Anna Karenina, like Madame Bovary. So you can think, wow, I like this book. Are there others like it? Go and find them. And all that can be done online, just checking. All I want to say at the end is you don't have to enjoy all of the books. Just because you've got a classic and read it doesn't mean it has to go in your library. Doesn't even mean you have to finish it. When we're talking about growing your personal library, we're talking about a library that is a representation of you, of your growth, of your history, of your experiences. So start with those cheaper books like Wordsworth Classics and Collins. Don't go out and buy some great bound leather volume which costs you £50 and you can't stand the book. Get it for free on Kindle, buy a cheap version, scribble all through it as you go with your thoughts. There is definitely a video you must go and watch of mine, which is how to read a book correctly. I'll put it at the end of the video. Definitely do that because it will help you with enjoyment of the classics. But then those that really get you, that linger with you days, weeks, months, years after you've read them, that just have these imprintable moments that you can't shake. Get those books in a better condition and make those your special classic library. And what you'll have is a joy, this intimate funness for your bookshelf. And not only that, when people come around and say, wow, you read these books, for that section you'll always be able to say, yes, I love all of them. So I hope you've enjoyed this video on how to build not just a library of classic books, but a library of classic books tailored for you, which help you explore you, which lead you into new worlds, which expand your horizon and understanding as you go of the world around you, taking you down new avenues, taking you through the back alleyways of topics you would never normally look at, whether they be romantic, whether they be science fiction, whether it's sheer imagination. Sometimes it's the absurd and the bizarre, whether it takes you to psychological, to philosophical, political, or economic. You don't know where these books will take you, but please take the advice in this video. Don't go out and just buy a load of books to make it look like a library of classics. Find the books you like first. Find what classic authors worked in that area and made sort of the pinnacle or the exemplary work of that kind. When you found the ones you really enjoy, read more of theirs. Let their own explorations in their own writing and art help you develop yours. Then work out from them to the books that inspired those authors. Find the other authors around, and then when you've found ones you love there, read more of their works and become familiar with them, and let them teach you where they learned from. And so they pass you on from one scholar to the next, from one mentor to the other. And that way, you will enjoy the journey of building your library up, and it will mean something to you always. Until the next time, I wish you joy in building your library.